Hi folks. There is a poster outside a church down the road from me and it bugs me. And the poster says, "God loves you, it's personal." Just those words and a picture of a cross or something. So it bugs me, of course, because it's not true. Well, first of all, what does it really mean? Who is it addressed to? Well, presumably the "you" in the poster means anyone who happens to see the poster, whether they're a Christian or not. God loves you. And it carries the idea that the fact that God loves you, whatever that means, it has to carry some kind of practical benefit for your life. Otherwise, it doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? For the Christian, I guess this means that God has a plan for your life, that nothing can happen to you unless God wills it, this sort of thing. I mean, when you're lying in bed at night and you hear the rustle of something outside, it could be someone who's going to break in and steal your possessions or rape you, but you have this confidence that nothing can happen to you unless God wills it. So it's kind of like a placebo. And this poster is saying that the love of God extends to everyone. But we know that's not true. You know what I mean? Is it true for a starving child in Africa whose stomach is bloated with malnutrition and they're covered in flies and maybe they're going to be dead in 2 weeks? What does the phrase "God loves you, it's personal," what possible relevance does that have to the life of such a child? I heard recently a horrible example. I heard about a baby who was raped. What do you say to something like that from a religious perspective? God loves you? No, it's wishful thinking, it's a delusion. And it makes me realize that if I ever sort of feel the pull back towards the old days in my life when I was a Christian, I realize that if I ever embraced that again, it would last for all of 24 hours before something like this would emerge and I would suddenly realize, what am I doing? This isn't true. And of course it isn't true. It wasn't true for all those Egyptian firstborn that God had killed. It wasn't true for all the children and the babies of the Amalekites that God had killed. You know the stories from the Old Testament that I'm referring to. And of course a Christian will say sometimes, but that was the Old Testament. What does that mean? What it seems to mean is that was before God knew any better. Are you really going to say that? When a Christian says that was in the Old Testament, I don't think they realize just quite how blasphemous they're actually being under the surface. So anyway, the thing is, you can choose to embrace this sort of wishful thinking, to have this placebo pill, this sort of spiritual placebo pill that allows you to feel like you've got some kind of measure of control over your life, that certain things just won't happen to you. But there's a dark side to all this. And the dark side is when it fails, when something terrible actually does happen to you. What do? And invariably what happens is you start to ask yourself, Lord, why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me? And you start to wonder, did I commit some grievous sin that God is now judging me for? And all these kinds of questions enter your mind. I have a friend in my life who's suffering at the moment, who's a Christian. And they wonder, is this because I've done something wrong? Because God is punishing me? And of course it's not hard to find something in your life that God could punish you for, because the standards of Christianity are so idealistic these impossible standards of valor that no one could possibly attain. We're all, human beings sitting here with our bad habits and our vices. Of course, it's easy to, to find something in our lives that we could say God's judging us for. And how do you really reconcile this idea of God as the loving Father figure, as He's presented in the New Testament, with this terrible, cruel sadism almost? And we even have the ultimate example of this sort of thing in the Bible, and that's the character of Job. Job was someone whom God boasted about, and then Satan said to God, "But look, he only worships you because you've put a hedge around him, you've given him everything, you've given him his heart's desire in every possible way." So God then allows Satan to take away all of Job's possessions, to kill all of his children, and to destroy his health. So he's covered from head to toe in boils. So there's not much worse that can happen to a person than something like that. And God did it as a test of Job's loyalty to him. And this sort of a story, it makes you realize that, well, anything really could happen to you. And there's even this sense in which, and I'm talking from experience here, there's even this sense in which, as you start to advance spiritually as a Christian, you start to wonder, because your relationship with God is deepening, you start to wonder, is God going to bring these kinds of trials into your life like He did for Job? Like, the more spiritual you become, the more endangered you are from a really, really hard test, like something like that. Anyway, my personal view is I just look at reality and let it speak for itself. What is life teaching me about the essence of life? And it simply teaches me that life is hostile on every level. It's hostile under the microscope. It's hostile as asteroids are floating around the universe. It's hostile in the animal kingdom with the predator versus the prey. And it's hostile here in human civilization. This is why I gravitate to the archetype of the adversary. You know what I mean by that, folks? The adversary, right? Simply because it is the most accurate representation of how life really is. So you can choose to have these delusions, these spiritual pipe dreams, these placebos. But when they fail, as they must do in the lives of some of us, that does great psychological harm to a person. And I can certainly point to elements of that in my life from the past. How much more of a breath of fresh air is it to simply have the courage to look at life and accept it as it really is?